Okay, welcome everyone. It's 3:06, so in Eastern time, 12:06 on the West Coast. So apologize, we're a little bit late getting started. But first off, I do want to take a moment to welcome everyone and thank you for joining today's Inside CanWNT webinar session, which of course is the second of a series of 6 webinars that the team will be delivering over the coming weeks. We sincerely hope everyone is well, staying safe wherever you are around the country. My name is Dominic Martin, Director of Marketing at Canada Soccer, and I'm just going to be covering off a few details before we get started. Of course, today's webinar is a continuation of our Canada Soccer Nation Inside initiative, which has been launched as part of our ongoing effort to encourage, engage, and motivate the Canadian soccer community as we all go through the COVID-19 pandemic together. For more information on the available resources and programming connected to this initiative, we certainly invite you to visit canadasoccer.com. So, continuing the hosting role for the Inside CanWNT webinar series are Canada Soccer legends Rian Wilkinson, currently Canada's women's national team assistant coach, as well as youth national team coach, and Robin Gale, who you can't see on the screen just yet, who is Canada Soccer's Excel mental and cultural manager. Of course, again, Rian and Robin's current roles follow their long and successful playing careers with Canada's women's national team, who they together making a combined 276 appearances for their country on the international stage. Today, we're extremely excited to welcome Kenneth Heiner Møller, Canada's women's national team head coach and women's national Excel director, to the webinar series, and we sincerely thank him for making the time today. As a quick reminder on the question and answer format, we do encourage attendees to submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A tool in Zoom. Questions will be selected throughout the discussion, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. Please note that we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible, time permitting, and also our ability to bring Robin into today's webinar, which we're working on. To optimize your experience during the Zoom session, we do recommend you select gallery view, as this will enable you to see all 3 participants during today's chat. Okay, enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Rian for now to get things started. So thank you and enjoy. And as noted, we are working on getting Robin in, so please have some patience with us as Rian is flying solo for the time being. So Rian, I'll turn it over to you now.
Oh, thanks, Dom. And hi, everyone, wherever you are in Canada. Thank you for joining us today. Robin and I were just chatting on WhatsApp trying to figure this out, and we liken this to a thunderstorm happening right before an international game, and it's like, is it going to happen? So hopefully she can join us soon, but we want to thank you for joining the 2 of us on the CanWNT. Every other Wednesday, we give you an inside look at the different elements of our program through the lens of different staff members and different players. So last week, we had the privilege of speaking to Kadisha Buchanan, Alicia Chapman, and Diana Matheson, who got to share some of their experiences and insight as members of the Canadian national team. And this week, we're so excited to have Kenneth Heiner Muller join us. Can you please say that one time? Kenneth, can you say your whole name, please?
I think that you definitely had the Kenneth Heiner and then the Muller. You need to, work on that, but you know that. Møller. There you go.
I feel like all Canadians need to work on that. That O is a challenge.
Well, when I present myself, I say Møller now because everyone says Møller, so that's all right.
Thank you for joining us then. With that change of your name, your assistant coach has an unpronounceable name, so everyone on the staff calls him AJ now, so we have to do that. I've been looking forward to this interview. This is one of the reasons Robin and I really wanted to do this every second week interview, because I really wanted to interview you, who doesn't want to grill their boss on a live webinar. But I hope you're not nervous, because I got to ask the questions and Robin put the pictures together. So I'm sure you're comfortable now.
Well,
yeah.
Remains to be seen.
Yes. No, and Robin has a history of finding the most unflattering pictures of everyone, so you should be a little bit nervous, just so you know.
Yeah, okay.
To kick things off, sorry, I'm now in charge of everything. Robin will join us, but could you please tell us a little bit about your soccer journey and how you got into coaching?
Yeah, I sure can. Well, I played as every other Danish European or whatever kind of kid. Growing up when I was 4 or 5, joined a club when I was 6, I think. The game was always something that I enjoyed. It's still like just a, playing or playing around kind of game to me. I think I fell in love with the game at the World Cup in 1978 for the men's. Denmark is a small country. We don't have a lot of spectators going at our matches, but I still remember this Argentina in 1978 playing against the Netherlands with all the confetti. Like it was an amazing experience to sitting in a living room in Denmark and watching how the wrapping of a game had an impact of how you can actually perceive a game and the intensity as well. And from there on, I was kind of sold. I grew up playing. I actually had a year off where I played badminton instead of soccer. But turned pro when I was 17. Played 10 years of professional soccer in Denmark and abroad. Had a few European games. Had a massive game against Porto, which I think was my the highlight of my career, playing in the Porto Stadium. We got definitely not a result that we wanted, but that was a great experience. And I came back to Denmark, broke my leg, and that was the end of my playing career. So I actually started my coaching career on crutches, coaching under 19 boys.
How old would you have been then?
Was 33, I guess, when I started coaching.
And when you were a player, was that something that you'd thought about, or did you end up coaching just because you broke your leg and you weren't really sure what else to do?
No, I took my B license when I was 23 or 24, A license when I was late 20s. So I knew I wanted to go down that route. I coached in badminton as well, and handball as well, and soccer as well, just, leisure, just for the fun of it. But I always knew I wanted to grow people or teach people. And because I always been in love with the game, it was kind of natural to become a coach. I hoped that it was going to happen later, but, when my leg broke, it was kind of, I guess, a message, now you're too old, go coach.
Yeah, it's never a great way to end a career on an injury. But you also talked about being a teacher and enjoying that element. And I know you've had other jobs throughout your career evolving into a coach. I think you were a high performance advisor back in Denmark, which would be maybe the equivalent of Own the Podium here in Canada. Are there things that you took from those other jobs, sort of the teaching element, the high performance advisor, that you now bring to your coaching role?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely other way around as well. I think, wow, that's great pictures. So working magic there, I guess. Anyway, yeah, but also bringing some experience from coaching into teaching and from coaching into high performance advisory for sure. So my first job was actually, I'm a psychologist from education, but I studied sports. Hey, Robin. So my first job was actually together with my 3 best friends. We opened a school and we educated people coming there in sports, different kind of physiology, anatomy and stuff. And I think that definitely gave me something to work with someone that you appreciate, and then you can do, stuff with as well. It's not just about getting the best, the one with the most knowledge around you. It's also someone that you actually appreciate. That gave me something. I worked as a psychologist and in how to, and trying to give teachers some tools so, you can zoom out. If you're not working with the kids, then you can zoom out, you look at relationships. High performance advisory for sure as well. Like I thought actually playing, when I played, the only athletes that was worth watching was men's football. And then I started to coach women. You said, oh, okay, well, women's football, you can watch that as well. But then all of a sudden I got into being a high performance advisor for road racing, which was extraordinary, for archery. And you know, from coming from soccer, which is it's a bigger sport in Denmark, men and women. And then you go archery, like, can you really learn something from archery? And then you see the way they coach, and from South Korea, how thorough they are, how much they put in every single day. The monotony that you feel they're doing, and they are just thinking about the little things that have a big impact, and just to get inspired from different environments. Sometimes I think coaches and football coaches in particular are so into themselves, and this is the only sport. But you can get so much of either studying other sports or getting inspired by other environments. And yeah, that was definitely something I appreciated, working as a high performance advisor.
Well, Kenneth, I imagine that I missed the question about your earrings, so I'm really disappointed about that. Oh, I haven't. Can you please explain this tape from the picture?
No, I don't have an earring. I'm just playing with tape because I think it's fancy.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? I had it like for a long period of time, but then I couldn't get it back in because you were not allowed to play with earrings. I couldn't get it back in, and then my wife said, "You know what? You've grown out of it." And
Thank you, Anya.
Yeah, we'll thank her later. Well, Kenneth, we know that, we were fortunate to have you join our team on staff as the assistant coach in 2016. And other than obviously having the privilege of working with Rien and I in different capacities, what was it about the team that attracted you to take on this opportunity and challenge with Canada?
Well, I was commentating the match that Canada play against the US at the London Olympics. And if you just picture, I could imagine like everyone was sitting here in Canada and watching that TV screen and being very excited. But as all of you know, that that's not the only event that takes place during an Olympics. There's so many different events taking place. So I had a small booth. It was just me, and as most know, that was a crazy game, and I was like jumping up and down my chair because this was an extraordinary match, and the result really didn't go the way that I hoped, and you guys hoped as well. But just going out of that little booth, and then nothing was happening. It was totally quiet, and I've been super excited. I think that was one of my first experiences with Canada. I watched them then on the youth as well, the World Cup that Canada hosted for the under-20s, and you could see, the talent just coming through this team, and most of I won't say most, but a lot of the core players in our team these days participated in that youth World Cup, and then just watching the World Cup from afar and seeing the support from the fans, which is extraordinary if you look towards Europe, especially at that point of time. So I think the talent that were coming through, the excitement about actually coaching or co-coaching, like a team that had the massive support of a country, and then the history as well. I think that was kind of it sparked some interest and enthusiasm going here.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you came. But once you made the move and you made that decision, like, it wasn't just you. Obviously, your wife and your daughters made the move with you, and we're fortunate to add them to our KNWNT family now. What was that like, relocating your family from Denmark to Canada?
Well, it was a hard one to begin with, right? It was definitely something me and my wife spoke a lot about. At the beginning, I said, no, I'm not doing that. Because it was like both of us had great jobs, our family lived close by, but then it was an opportunity as well to go and live abroad and doing something that I really loved. And, you can go worse places than Canada for sure. So, but it was a tough start for the kids. They said they could say red and blue and yes and no and right and left. So they thought they kind of spoke the language. And my wife and I, Anya, still talk about the first Friday we went to pick them up, and like both of them looked sick. They were just pale. And they were so exhausted, like being in surroundings where they understood absolutely, I won't say nothing, but minimal around it. But again, just the experience of seeing someone like, you know, my kids growing in that environment, it's been tremendous. And then the experience about being here, I will say the culture is somewhat similar, but there's a lot of different things as well. You know, in Denmark, we got this killer snail, like a killer snail. And do you know what that does? It's actually eating your crops. So it's eating carrots and radishes, and that's our most dangerous animal, right? And then you go out here, the first little walk we took, there was a cougar sighting with what? And yeah, there's, you know, so many things here that, you know, when you put your disposal out, you cannot put the food out because the bear is going to be there. And when you kind of have that conversation with, you know, the families back home, they're having a hard time understanding what we're actually experiencing. So hard time moving here, but what a time we are having here.
I can imagine, like, the transition from snails to cougars was quite the jump.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is.
But with that, like, there are other coaches maybe aren't making a move from Europe to North America, but maybe within the province or from one city to another. What advice would you have for other coaches who may be considering making a move with their family?
Well, I think one of my very good friends has said once that you're always gonna regret the opportunities you do not take, and sometimes you definitely, you know, you take a step somewhere and you might go and regret it, but at the other time, like the opportunities you sometimes see when you go out of maybe your comfort zone, maybe your province, maybe your city, it's just amazing. Some people or families or coaches might stay at home where it's safe, but if you really want to grow, then, you know, get away from that comfort zone. I still remember because it was the first time I coached in English, and I knew exactly what I was saying, but there was a lag time between what I knew, what I was about to say, and then what I actually said. And those 2 seconds was just up. Like, it was like, well, coaching moment is over. But hopefully I kind of narrowed the 2 seconds down to maybe 0.5 seconds, so I can get my message across. But yeah, I'll always encourage, you know, anyone who's got dreams about moving abroad or going to a different province or changing their clubs they've been in for 10 years, just mix it up a little bit and get some inputs and experience.
Yes, it's good advice. We talk about being uncomfortable and pushing ourselves, and yeah, definitely for coaching to keep evolving. And I know your family's been a wonderful addition to the soccer community. And just a quick story, because I thought it was so touching, but my sister's a nurse, and you guys painted some rocks to her and put them outside, and she's sleeping off her night shift right now, but I know that was a beautiful thing you guys did. A question that came in, I think it's very interesting. You played professionally, you played in a stadium in Porto, you've played at the highest levels in many ways, and then you end up coaching the women. I know a lot of coaches are nervous about that transition, going from men's soccer to women's soccer. Have you found that to be a challenge? Have you found it to be difficult? What's the difference between that?
Yeah, yes, there's definitely differences. I think you cannot go in and say like everything is the same. The game is the same, the everything that's around the same, the rules are the same and all that stuff, but there's definitely also differences. But I, from my perspective, it's all like, no matter if you're changing from one club to another, there's differences. And you just have to, you know, find your way around it. It's not that different, but it is different. So the same thing as going from Denmark to Canada. Like it's the same, more or less, but there is differences. And you need to make sure that you adapt to those differences, because there's culture connected. You can maybe have an impact on a culture, trying to, but it's also making sure that you're not coming in and trying to change everything. I think it's I've been so challenged going into women's soccer, because a lot of them do ask, or a lot of the first team asks why. When I said we're going to do this and that, and they said why, and I was like, You're asking me why? I'm telling you, you have to do this, and they're asking me why. And it definitely I reflected way more before I actually started to say, do this and do that, because I knew that why was coming. I think the biggest one is, we got players here in Canada that are world class, and they cannot live the rest of their lives just, looking at the bank account. So there's so much more going on around the game that these players have to put attention into. I know the game is improving. I know the money is definitely going better, but like we're not making the money that they're doing if you're playing a pro on the men's side. So adjusting, everyday life with the game, I think that's a massive difference.
Thank you. You came in 2018 as an assistant coach to John Herdman. So here you are.
Relax now.
What have you found to be the biggest difference between being an assistant coach to being a head coach? And is there any advice you would give to any assistant coaches right now who are thinking about becoming head coaches in the future?
Well, I think the biggest difference is I'm actually attending the press conference. No, it's more than that, right? There's a lot of it depends a little bit on how you are assisting. I think the way I assisted John, the way I also have assistant coaches in my team is if you just make them move cones and they don't have an impact, they can never become a head coach. But if they're actually very much involved with what you're doing, and if I'm involved in what John was doing, you can be a head coach and take over. It definitely give you some insight and give you a head start if you go from assistant coach to a head coach, if you're doing the assistant coach job. The way I think, and you should be assisting your head coach, or the way that, you want the assistant coach to assist you. I still remember when I had the P license in Denmark, our coach had, he spoke at a conference. He said, the loneliest job you can have on this planet is becoming a head coach. I was like, I'm not going to be that kind of head coach who is, a lone wolf sitting in the front of the bus that no one speaks to. So yes, at the end of the day, it's going to be my call who's playing. It's going to be my call what kind of structure we're playing and all that. But it's never going to be me telling everyone else what's actually happening. And I've never been involved in some kind of team that has that. So I think I've got one exception though, but that was when we played Germany in Canada, because I wanted to play with a back three. And I remember the last thing I said before we got into camp was, we're going to play with a back three. And when you get there, you're going to be, thinking that's the best decision ever. So I think that was the only time, but beyond that, it's always, including, involving, and if you do that as a head coach, then the assistant coach can definitely step in and take over.
Yeah, well, I feel a bit lied to because I saw this picture before I agreed to be your assistant coach. No, it's definitely a team effort. I've learned a lot from working with you, and that sort of comes into the next question I have, and that's around coaching philosophy. And it's something that people always ask me. I'm sure they ask you, what's your coaching philosophy? And it's so hard to answer because you're always developing as a person and as a coach. But maybe you could describe how you want your teams to look like and play like, instead of the overall arching philosophy, what it is you want to see on the field from your team.
I think the biggest, if you're a good coach, you always have a clear expression with your team. Like it's very, very obvious for everyone who's attending that this is the expression of the team. I think that's if you're doing your job good or if you're doing your job mediocre. I've always wanted to have my team being in control. I think if Canada didn't have the players that they do, I would never try to make them in control on the ball or off the ball. But I think that Canada can do both, like controlling the game with the ball, but also being in control of the game off the ball. But I do think, and this is maybe just me, I want to win more than anything. No matter what, but I also want the crowd coming into the stadiums afterwards, leaving the stadium and having this great mood, as a great mood, and being excited about how the players on the pitch try to play their best game, like just on the edge of their ability. I want spectators to have that feel that we are actually doing our best, like really our best, and sometimes making mistakes because that's part of the game. But really trying the hardest we can to give our best game on and off the ball. And that's also in my, maybe not playing philosophy, but coaching philosophy. I hate when I played, when some coach told me to do something I knew in and out. That was the worst games, like the worst games ever. So it has to be someone where players come on the pitch and they're kind of not nervous, but excited. Can I do this? I cannot do this. If they're playing, a perfect game at 80%, I would be so frustrated if I was a player. So it's about, playing at your edge of the ability, giving the crowd, a massive experience watching individuals and players, a team playing on the edge of their ability. And then sometimes, it's going to collapse because we're playing above our ability, but never a mediocre team.
Well, Kenneth, when you speak about kind of pushing the envelope of your teams, if we think back to 2019 at the World Cup, the team had performed well, but we didn't get the results that we had targeted. Going through that tournament, the margins were very tight. We ended up losing 2-1 and 1-0 to the eventual silver and bronze medalists with Sweden, the Netherlands and Sweden. But as a result, coming out of that tournament, one of the big learnings from the team was to improve our ability to score. And behind the scenes, this is a project that we've been working on. And I've gotten your permission ahead of time to look at a couple of slides, because I think it would be cool to share that insight with some of the audience members that are here today on what it is we're working towards and how we're planning on making progress with scoring goals going forward.
Yeah, well, I think that's like the World Cup was a fantastic experience in so many ways. And obviously it was as devastating as it was fantastic to leave the tournament too soon. Definitely too soon, not just for me, but for the fans, the country, the players more than anything. I definitely felt for them. We shouldn't have gotten home when we did. But again, it's the beauty of the game also in low scoring competitions like the World Cup is. We always look at stats from games and see what we can improve on. And I think the slides that I sent you was around the final acts to begin with. Here you go. That's what we always measure and always have measured. And going across the 4 games we played at the World Cup, like the two first on top, like against Cameroon. So the final acts is something, it's either crosses or shots at target. And then, the yellows is quality. If it's quality final acts where you do have a first connection on a cross, it's a quality final act. If you do hit the target on a shot, it's a quality final act. And if you look, like we had more final acts in all our opposition. We only won 1-0 against Cameroon. We only won 2-0 against New Zealand. Then we lost to the Netherlands and Sweden. And we knew this going into the World Cup, that we needed more shots on target than our opposition to score. But we didn't have enough time to fix it. We looked at some kind of adjustments. We did have some key performance indicators that also showed coming out of the World Cup that, to actually go ahead and win a tournament, not just to participate, not just to get to the quarterfinal, but to actually win, we needed to improve on several aspects. And this is what came out of the technical report, which is extraordinary for a Canadian team to have the most passes and a lot of pass success. And if you just click the next one, not just that, but average ball possession higher than any other team in the World Cup, and you click the next one, it's not just about having ball possession, but it's actually about passing beyond defenders. So it's not just keeping the ball on our half, it's actually bypassing defenders. And then the last one is about final third and penalty area interest. So it's not just about passing, it's also being dangerous. So we had a lot of these key performance indicators that we ticked, but we couldn't score a lot of as much as we did. as much as we wanted. So we started to work around this more goals project to see. So we had, took a lot of shots. Every time that we had an opportunity to shoot, we took it, but maybe not when we had the opportunity to score. So it's a difference to shoot when you can, or to shoot when you're actually think you can score. So these were our first iteration, looking at the creation. So the crosses, the touches, who sets it up. So we looked at the first assist and the second assist. So where do the crosses come from? Where do the assists to the cross come from? Who's actually delivering that? And when we do take a shot, what is the expected goal from that situation? And that was the first iteration, just at the back end of 2019. And then if you click the last one, it's about where we're at right now, and looking at a game we played this spring against the Netherlands. Again, we drew 0-0. We definitely had more crosses, more fine lacks, more everything than them. But now we can look at where do the crosses actually come from. Who's creating the crosses? What is the success rate? We look at the areas we are filling. How many times are we actually in the first area, the second area, the penalty area, when the ball arrives there? And then the box movement, what you can see at the right side is more like who is there. When it's red, it's when they do have the opportunity to be there and they're not, and in green when they do have the opportunity to be there and they are. So this is more like being very specific and focused about the last third, or how we're actually creating our score chances, because that's something that we were lacking for sure at the World Cup, and one of the gaps that we are trying to bridge going into the Olympics.
Yeah, and I think I think it's fair to say with the top teams, every team is striving to score more goals and to keep clean sheets. But for us, what is it about Canada that, what's our X factor on the world stage?
Well, I think like every camp I'm in, every camp I came into when I first arrived, it was this feeling about like familiarity of being a family. So this about saying that we are a very connected group is our X factor. If that's going to win us medals, not solely, like just because you're connected cannot win you medals, but you cannot win a medal without it. I think that's the important part, like being away from each other so long as we are. You're working a lot, Robin, in this area of keeping everyone connected and engaged, making sure that, no matter if they're living in Europe or in the States or in Canada, or where they're living, where they're at right now, or how, what they're experiencing, they're always connected somehow, either through Zoom meetings like this, which is, the new normal, or, just on a call. And you can feel it coming into this environment. Like if it's so interesting coming into the environment, and so interesting now to be in the environment, seeing new people coming and saying, wow, that they're just so happy to be together. And then there is this fine line about like happy to be together and then push each other as well, which is a big part of being also connected, that you can actually tell someone when they are supposed to do something different than they are on the pitch and off the pitch. And fortunately, it doesn't happen a lot that we have to tell someone that they are, stepping a little bit out of what they should, or they should do something different. But it's a part of being connected that you can actually have honest discussions or conversation with your teammates.
Yeah, that's definitely a tradition that we take very seriously, that connection and the honest conversations. Just to ask a question that April asked, what kind of software do you use for the More Goals project? And if you were working for a smaller club in Canada and you were interested in maybe introducing something like that, what would you suggest if they had a lower budget? How could they maybe still do the same thing?
Well, we do use Game Breaker as where we code it, but then we use Keynote somewhat to present it. So like we brought an expert in. That means someone who's only focusing on this, because we only got so much time in camp and after camp. So So it's not just about scoring goals, it's how we're getting there. But I wanted someone whose only focus was on that. But you can do it. Like I did the same thing when I was a one-man band with a club, right? It's just about having a paper and a pencil, and then you can have a cross and it's a minus, or you can have a cross and a plus, and then you can put it into an XPS sideline, whatever kind of software you use if you really want to fancy it up. But it's all about having some kind of well, now I'm saying database, but it's actually just experience enough gathering things together. And all of a sudden you get some patterns where you might have your striker taking shots from stupid positions, or you might have someone actually crossing from positions where they could improve on that. Like the fun thing is I actually got inspired by going to the New Orleans Pelicans and having them introduce me to all kinds of statistics. They got like 6 guys, I think, only working on statistics. And I'm looking like, I'm not going to get 6 guys working on statistics. But then I found the way that we could work on it, the way that suited us better than not having anything, or having, the Rolls Royce version. So for me, it's statistic, but it's also subjective. So it's not, I don't think you can have, the deviation points and all that happening and perfect graphs, but it's something that we can use. And I think you can do that if you're the only coach, or if you've got one assistant coach, if you've got a paper and pencil, you can do that and you can find some interesting stats from it.
Yes. It's interesting how you tied in, the earlier question about what you learned from other sports and how you're continuing your growth by going down, working with another sport and bringing something you learned there back to the team. So 2020 has been interesting, all in all. We are so lucky in Canada and in Canadian soccer that we actually qualified for the Olympics early this year, and it got it out of the way. A lot of Canadian athletes still hadn't qualified. There's all that anxiety about how that was going to happen, but our CONCACAF tournament was early this year. The gap between Canada, US, the top teams, and the Haiti, Jamaica, Mexico, Costa Rica, that's getting smaller and smaller. I'd like to know your opinion on that and why or how they're what they're doing to pick up their level, but also what are we doing in Canada to make sure that we stay ahead and that we're consistently qualifying for major world events, Olympics and World Cups?
Yeah, well, I think, like if you compare Haiti to, for instance, like Mexico, it's 2 different things. Mexico is trying to keep everyone in Mexico, and because they develop a domestic league where they want to grow their players. They got this thing, I think it's about 7 players have to be under the age of 23 to be in a team, and they're kind of connected to the men's club there. Haiti, they got like world-class players now playing in France, and I mean like world-class players that are playing in Europe. So it's different, but they are definitely closing the gap. I think what we're doing right now is not trying to make sure that the gap exists or increase. It's more like making sure that we improve as well. So it's not about continuously improving the distance to them, but it's improving ourselves. What do we need to improve on? I think that's on, getting our players to the right clubs, making sure that they do have game time, connect on games with players that are playing abroad. So doing our own thing, our own Canadian thing, looking at curriculum from our rec centers and saying, so what are the future for the game? What do we want to improve on? I think that's from an individual perspective. Obviously, we work on tools. Like the players are 80% not in like the Canada soccer environment. They're in their clubs. So trying to push them to work on tools. So when they get back, we got a bigger toolbox, and we test that every single time we do play friendly. So what can we do now with this toolbox? They go away and they try to, improve on passing, crossing, shooting, corners, whatever. They come back. Now what can we do? And we test that all the time in friendlies. We are so fortunate, as you mentioned as well. We already qualified. So these friendlies are about making sure that we test our tools and our toolbox to see, so what is next for us? where do we need to improve on? It's not about winning every single match. Yes, it is, but it's also about finding, so what do we need to improve on? And I think that's how we keep the CONCACAF teams below us, but more about how can we constantly improve our game.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but as your tech staff, you're constantly making sure that we're planning, reviewing, and innovating, like never just staying the same, always pushing to be better ourselves as well as a team every day. What do you think the key for us is to get consistent winning results against the top teams, those France, Germany, and the US, that obviously has been this huge challenge for us over the last few years? But what is it against these top teams that we need to implement and to deliver consistently in order to get consistent results in the future?
Well, US is I think that's a story to itself, right? So again, I feel Canadian, but I'm not, and I've only played a couple of times against US, but the mindset going in there from a team is totally different than when you play Germany and France. And I'm just saying, like, I'm just whispering, they're not that good, right? They're good, but they're not that good. And it seems like going into these games is like playing something exceptional. I think just at the qualifiers, right? And it's difficult playing at the qualifiers because you play teams that you are far better than, I feel, a lot. And then all of a sudden you play US that is as good as we are. And then like we performed very well for a half. If we were lucky, we've been 1-0 up, but then they score a goal and it's like, whoa, that's typical. But if you play Germany or if you play France, it's not, everyone's kind of, well, now it's happening again. So I think that's something that, I want to say we are as good, that pushing our envelope and our limits all the time. But I think it's that consistency. I think when you look at the World Cup, we had this little saying, you're part of that group as well, Rian. If you're in a bad mood, take a look at some of the games from the World Cup, because we played extraordinary good in some of these matches. Didn't score, didn't win against the teams we wanted to win against, but we played extraordinary good consistently, like throughout that tournament. Some nerves and against Cameroon for sure, but I think that's one of the keys to be consistently, which is kind of a boring word, but it's also consistently at a high level. And that's, if you wanna win the World Cup, if you wanna win the Olympics, you cannot have a dip. I think we got the players to actually, be rested without having a dip of performance. But yeah, we'll find it.
Well, now, Kenneth, we're all kind of experiencing and navigating together this uncharted territory of the realities of COVID-19. The first confirmed change that we've seen is that the Olympics have moved from this summer to 2021. We've been getting a couple of questions in the chat around what you've been doing and what the staff has been doing to continue to prepare the team for Tokyo next year.
Yeah, well, a lot of things. I think that maybe the staff has been even more busy than being in a normal year. Well, we're trying to keep the players fit, and that's the peak team, making sure when the tournament gets up and running again, the risk of injury will be diminished. So the way they work around that, taking care of all the little knocks that players always carry. Even though there's an off season, they always carry it into the preseason of the next year. We got Zoom online workouts like 3 times a week. I've been one of them, and it's pretty challenging, but it was fun. But again, like that's building connection. I think, I honestly do think that being like there is a physical outcome of being on that Zoom workout. I was sore in some kind of muscles I didn't even knew I had. But it's always, also just seeing each other, being, close to each other, hearing each other's voices that are kind of cool. There have been culture connects driven by you, Robin. The tech staff has, after the 4 nations in France, we played, we're so fortunate we actually played 11 out of the top 13 team in the world the last year and a half, I think. So we got a good idea on what kind of gap that we need to bridge. So we made a very thorough gap analysis, and now it's about looking at, what's urgent, what's important, but also what's possible when we kind of contrast ourselves to being perfect or the best teams in the world. So it's utilizing this time to its best, so we come out of this knowing exactly what we want to do moving forward.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. Just to piggyback on that, the tech staff has been working hard behind the scenes. It's been a cool time to actually connect and really dig deep on a few things. So yeah, interesting time for sure. More computer work as a coach than I'd expected. But
yeah, different.
Canada's a soccer nation. I know just all of us that wear the badge are so proud of the place that our game, soccer, plays in our country. And I was just looking before, I think we have like just under 900,000 registered players here in Canada, and the level is improving quickly. We have female and male players playing in some of the top leagues in the world, some of the best teams in the world. Kadisha Buchanan on Lyon, who's a Champions League winner twice, I believe now, and obviously Alfonso in Bayern Munich. So definitely Canada's players are really starting to take place on the world stage. As a European who's moved to Canada, how do you see soccer continuing to grow and develop in the country? And where do you think we need to do better in order to bridge that gap between us and maybe some European countries who are historically so strong?
Well, I think there might be, multiple ways of doing that. I think what I've experienced here more than anywhere is when players are actually selected or deselected. So both my girls are playing in a club, and the stage, the age stage when they're actually getting into the first team or the second team is. I co-edited a book called Age-Related Training Concept, and a part of that is something about selection and deselection, when you can actually say if players are going to make it. So there's something around when you do select players. We got this motto in Denmark, but also in the coaching group, right, about as many as possible for a long time as possible. I know the possible thing is a key because there's like 900,000 active. Then you cannot have everyone in the same training group no matter the age, and there is definitely opportunities to have 2 sessions with the best group and 2 sessions with honor, but you cannot select at the age that you do select in some clubs. I think that's one. I think the youth need to play games that matters more than anything. You bring the best players in our Rex program, but they play against boys, which is great, but they're not a part of the tournament. I think that's definitely also an important tool. And then at some point of time, I do hope that, a pro club, 2 pro clubs will emerge in Canada, becoming a part of, you can have the MLS playing, right? And you can have the NBA across borders. So why can't there be a women's club, or maybe 2? To represent Canada? I think that will be having a major impact on the game as well. I think that's from a more like generic standpoint. I think from a coach's standpoint, it's also being interested in discussing the game. There's not a right way or wrong way. I don't have the right way of playing. I don't have the wrong way either. I have a way. And just being, curious on the game, discussing the game, not just because I'm a national, a head coach of the women's national team. I'm not right. I discuss the game and challenge each other, challenge the coaching staff as well, because it is subjective. That's the beauty of this game. It's super subjective. So I think that from a coaching perspective as well, making sure that the game is discussed in detail if you want to.
Well, Kenneth, I'd like to use this time to congratulate you. You've survived the first round of questions from Rain and I. However, and I apologize that I wasn't able to join on time, but I'm going to make up for that. So we're going to go to some questions from the audience. And the first one I have for you comes from Lane. And she would like to know, what was the most exciting game of soccer you've ever played or coached in?
I think the most exciting game I played was in the Cup Winners' Cup in Europe. I played in Ferencváros, which was a Hungarian team. And if anyone knows something about Hungary, they always choose the wrong side in wars. So they did. But then there also was this little marionette puppet, I guess, for the Russians. But we played CSKA Moscow in I think it was round of 16 or something, and we had a penalty shootout at the end, and being a part of that, and obviously we won because otherwise it would be the worst memory. But you know, us celebrating that as if we have won the entire tournament, I think that's from a player standpoint what has been the most exciting. I think from a coaching standpoint, two games comes into mind. One is the Australia match at the Olympics in 2016 when we went down one like very early in the game and had to play 10 against 11, and everything that should have happened in one tournament happened in one game, and the activity on the bench was pretty amazing, and how we tried to cope with playing 10 against 11 against a very, very good opponent. Was exciting as well. So that's one. Then I'll say maybe the US game disqualified because we tried something very different and we had one session to do it, and then seeing how players could actually adapt into a role of playing, you know, that kind of game just with one session was kind of wow. Like those players, the ability to conform into something with, you know, 45 minutes of walking around literally in your training shoes. Like that was so cool. So I think, yeah, got a lot though.
Well, you talk about preparing the team with that tight turnaround for a game against, you know, a tier 1 opposition like the US. And one of the questions that Chloe had was, what do you do or use to motivate the players prior to international matches?
So I don't motivate. I might be the worst motivator in the world. If anyone expect me to come in and motivate women's national team player, they're wrong. I'm not doing that. It's more like the other way around. They're super motivated coming in. I think it's more about energy management more than anything. Some players might come up to a match where we are supposed to win, not bringing the right kind of attention into it, and always, you know, be a little bit ahead. And that's just, you know, bringing them back and saying, you know, the most important match is what's right in front of you, and the next pass is the most important pass you're going to make in your entire life. So bringing them back to the now, and also if they're super nervous, the same thing, bringing them back to the now. So I think I'm working with a very motivated group. I think in this period, when you're actually, you know, having players who are in preseason for 6 months, 8 months, like I don't know how much, that might be something you need. But, you know, that's why you're here, Robin, right? That's your gift to get, yeah, you together with other staff. No, I think they're so self-driven, these players, that it's sometimes more about managing the other way around, making sure that, you know, they're more calm stepping on the pitch than super excited.
Yeah. So when you talk about managing, there's been a couple of questions looking for your coaching advice. So I'm going to combine 2 questions from Christopher and Iggy, and they kind of want to know what advice you would have for coaches who are currently working in the rep system and would, you know, aspire to be coaching on the national team one day.
So I've experienced actually coming also to Canada. There's always you know, coaches wants to have a path, a career plan or whatever, and I find that very hard in this job, to actually go say, well, now I'm working with the Rex as an assistant, I want to be the Rex, and then I want to be this, and then I want to be that. I don't think it's the right way to work. I think it's about improving, and then like making sure that you improve every day, every week, every month, having that interest in the game and yourself education and involvement, that you actually continue to grow as a coach. And then you'll find yourself in, you know, great opportunities to actually being having a job. Like you don't get into these jobs just by accident or being lucky or because you know someone or because you want to, this is my career plan. It's because you improve every single day. I think that's what's the key is for if you're working as a car salesman or a coach or as a player or as a teacher. And if you want to thrive to be the best, then other opportunities will open. But a career plan, I cannot see that happen for a coach. No.
Well, a part of Iggy's question was around like if you're a coach or coach in training and you haven't had the experience of playing at a high level in the game, what advice would you have for them? Do you think that's relevant or necessary, or are there other ways to make up for that?
Well, there's so many good coaches that do not have an experience of actually playing the game. I do think that you do have an advantage that might be caught off at some point. But it's definitely studying the game. It also depends what you want to be, right? I don't think I've got the don't have the capability or maybe the patience of coaching under 8. I tried to coach under 6 and I wasn't very good at it. I can tell you that. So if you want to be a coach for under 6 and under 8, and I've got the biggest respect, I've got the biggest respect for those who actually do coach under 6 and under 8. My wife is a great example. I still remember the first time I was down coaching my daughters, right? They were doing I wanted them to have a pass, passing back and forth and dribbling. I told them, now you're passing, now you're dribbling. And they didn't do anything I asked them to do. And then Anya stepped in and then she said, you're now, running across a pond and there's these crocodiles and they want to grab you. And then they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And that's just an example about some coaches are just gifted with actually being coaching kids, which, why do you want to have them want to aspire to be a head coach of a senior team if that's where they're so good? I know it's part of our job to make sure that they do get acknowledged for that and how important they are for the kids actually to stay in. Because if I was to continue with these under 6, they will never continue because I was the worst coach of that team. But yeah, I forgot the question now.
Me too. No, you've answered it. But you talked about, players staying in the game from that young age of like a U6. And one thing that we've done really well with our program, Canada Soccer as a whole, is reintegrating players and keeping players involved in the game and coming back on staff. And I've seen, the time that you put towards making sure that we grow in our development and that you mentor some of the coaches coming through. And, something that many people won't even know is that you were in Uruguay supporting Riri when she was there with the U17s. So a question we had from Ryan Wilson was, why do you think it's important to continue bringing former players into the game?
Oh, well, they know about the culture, for sure. They know about what it takes. So I think what Rian and yourself have that I have absolutely no chance of telling people is, I can say, this about being Canadian is, well, I'm not Canadian. This about being a woman is, well, I'm not a woman. And then this about being a part of a World Cup or an Olympics, I haven't been there. So the credibility of actually having, to say, I've been there, I know what it's like, it gives you an advantage. At some point, it's going to stop, right? Because then you're aged 10 years and 12 years and nobody can remember you anymore. I don't know, but it gives you an advantage of actually having an impact. And then the knowledge and the insight into the women's national team, which is it's an environment that's so unique. And I think the players say that, and you guys say that, but the players have experienced that in the clubs. I've experienced that with different national teams across women's and men's, different clubs, different sports, all that. And the environment is unique. If you want to bring someone in from the outside, you've got to be very, very cautious who you bring in, because it takes a lot of time to build a culture. You can ruin a culture within weeks. So actually having players, former players in, who can also step in on the pitch, if we need anyone to be the opposition. then they know the game rules. They know everything about, being in that environment, what it takes and what you can and what you cannot do. And I think that's a major asset of bringing former players in.
Right. Well, what I've heard is that Reen and I have about 4 more years until our relevancy runs out. But
4 years seems like a lot, Rob.
Oh, yeah, Kenneth. And the last question I have for you is, we have one of the greatest players, arguably the greatest player, with Christine St. Clair in our program. What is it like working with and coaching St?
It's a privilege. It is I'm always going to remember actually being at the stadium when she broke that record, because it's a record I cannot it's never going to be broken. I cannot see who is doing that. Before I came, I obviously knew of her. The first time I saw her play live was in Denmark. Denmark was up 3-1. I wasn't the coach. Denmark was up 3-1, and they essentially lost 4-3, and Sinky scored 2 goals. And on the same day that Liverpool won the infamous Champions League trophy, when they were down against Milan as well. So I've experienced this seeing her, but now also experienced this traveling with her. Most Canadians know that when we play in Canada, people get nuts when her number is called. People get nuts when she's around. But it's actually the same when you go to the States. It's actually the same when you go to France. It's actually the same when you go to Germany. And the way, she's just carrying herself is remarkable. And she's just a good person. I think she's a great player, but she's a good person. And she has every, I won't say right, but if you put she's got the Order of Canada, and she's the player who scored the most international goals in across men and women, across all, decades. If she had a different character, she could be arrogant. She could. She could just be, you know what, I'm Sinky, go away. I don't want to speak to you. But she does. You have this great character. Maybe that's what's actually provided her with being the best goal scorer across men and women, and also being awarded the Honor of Canada. But yeah, she's got great character. It's great working with her. It's different, of course. She's got experience, so it's more asking her, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you experience? But it's the same working with Diana, working with Desiree. Some of these players maybe also playing the game. Don't tell players what to do. Don't. Sometimes you have to, especially in the early stages of their career, but they know it. So just ask them. But it is a privilege.
As someone who works with the youth teams, I use Sinky as an example a lot, not just because of her technical, tactical ability, but because I think and believe that character is just as important. And she is obviously a wonderful example of that, and sets the standard for the level of work people put into session every day. Because if Christine's doing it, you don't have an excuse. And right here is Lea Parsons, one of our young players coming out of Alberta Rex. And she wanted to ask what it is that, the qualities and characteristics you look for in young players coming through the system.
Well, I want players to be curious. I want them to be passionate. I want them to be self-driven, self-motivated. And so that comes way above skill set for me, way above skill set. Obviously, you cannot make it without having some kind of skill set. But it's something about what you bring. I've seen too many promising players with a skill set, and then they have they give all the responsibility to you as a coach and say, so what do you think I want to improve on, or have to improve on, instead of taking responsibility. One of the best, I've got my first coaching job in Denmark was this under-19 team, and there was one guy, and he was in the second team. Then he was under 19. He came as a sub, but he worked hard. He was there before the session. He was there after the session. He went home and he had dinner. He came back, and then he was on the pitch again. And he made 10 years as a professional soccer player, just surpassing everyone else. And if I go back and I look at him and his skill set, he was decent at most, but not remarkable good. But he was super passionate. Like, he was super passionate about the game. He asked so many questions, and he was self-driven. So that comes way beyond skill set, but you do have to have some kind of skill set going there, for sure. But it's more about the mentality you bring in, the character you bring in. I think that's important.
Well, you've talked about it a lot, and we have an exciting crop of players coming through our system right now. We have Jade Riviere, Jordan, Julia, who all would have been on the under-20 team. We've got Jade Rose, and we also have Olivia Smith moving through the 17s, as well as a number of players that are pushing and looking to get a cap or an appearance with the national team soon. What is it about our young players that excites you the most?
Oh, there's like the three players that you mentioned, and some of the other players I've seen as well. So this is definitely not a job going to Uruguay to work with Rian, for sure. But looking at how she brings the best out of players, and this is not said just because you're here, Rian, but that's the exciting part, I think, for Canada, to look what's actually coming through our system. So we could have decided to go towards the under-20 qualifiers with a lot of these players that you mentioned, but decided not to, because we look more into the women's national team and the development of the players. Players like Jade Rose, who got a start at the women's national team at a World Cup. Can't even remember her age, right? Olivia Smith, who the first session, she just cut on the inside and she blasted the ball in the top corner with the left foot, and we were kind of, oh, that's decent. But it's all about these players coming through, and what I said earlier, if they don't carry themselves well, I've seen too many players having the skill set that I wouldn't put extra effort into, but I think it speaks to what's done in all the provinces. So being a national team head coach, you can only pick the ones who are actually, good enough. I'm not making them good. I'm just looking at the ones good enough and seeing if I can match them up to become a team. The one who's also always putting in the effort is all the coaches in the provinces, the Rex coaches, the Super Rex coaches, the youth coaches. Those are the ones who are having the impact on the players. And then the coaches that are working with the players in their daily training environment. So it speaks massively to the coaches around Canada about the young players coming into our program.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely some exciting talent coming through. And actually, next seminar in 2 weeks' time on June 3rd, we're going to actually be interviewing the head of our REX, our Regional Excellence Programming, Danny Worthington, who will be presenting our Playground to Podium pathway and what we'll be looking at. Definitely hope everyone can join us back then. But before I let everyone go, tomorrow is Throwback Thursday for Canada Soccer. And they're actually going to be looking at the Algarve Cup from 2018, which was your first tournament in charge. And my memory of it is actually getting sent to the game before ours to film and scout the game before, and it was torrential rain. And I spent the whole time texting you pictures of the field saying, there's no way this is going ahead. There's no way. And now, with more coaching experience, I can't believe the kind of pressure and stress I was sending back to you. But what are your memories from that first tournament, the Algarve Cup?
Oh, roller coaster for sure, right? I think we ended up in a great space. It was a tough tournament because we were supposed to have been in China. That was canceled, so this was my first time as a head coach. And then we had a horrendous match against Sweden. We were not on the same page for sure, but then we got some of the leadership group from the players stepped in and kind of spoke to the players. And this is just again a privilege about coaching this team and addressing a little bit about what this team is about. And then we bounced back. We had some great matches at the end. We ended up winning 2-0 against Japan, who a couple of months later went back to become Asian champion. So yeah, it was a tough start, but a great finish to that tournament. I can't remember all your text, Rin, so that might be good.
You for sure muted me, for sure, because there were a lot. And video, I think I sent video.
I might have done that.
No, well, I hope everyone enjoys that from Canada Soccer. Kenneth, from Robin and I, huge thank you. And thank you to everyone who is joining us today. I hope you're all safe and healthy, and I hope you can join us in 2 weeks' time on June 3rd. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenneth. Brian, leave the meeting.